The early morning sun hadn't yet peeked through the windows of the Small Blessings diner when Rose walked in for her usual morning shift. At 32, she had spent the last 5 years serving customers at this modest establishment in downtown Philadelphia, making just enough to support herself and her young daughter. The diner, with its worn leather booths and slightly crooked ceiling fans, wasn't much to look at, but it was home to countless stories of everyday people sharing meals and moments. Rose knew every regular customer by name, remembered their usual orders, and had a special way of making everyone feel welcome. That particular Wednesday morning started like any other. The coffee maker hummed steadily in the background, and the smell of fresh bacon wafted from the kitchen. Rose tied her apron around her waist, pulled out her notepad, and prepared for another day of serving with a smile, despite the weight of mounting bills at home. Around 11 a.m., during the pre-lunch rush, a tall figure ducked through the diner's entrance. Rose's eyes widened slightly as she recognized the famous rapper and internet sensation Big Shaq, known for his viral hit, "Man's Not Hot." He was wearing a simple hoodie and seemed to be trying to keep a low profile. As fate would have it, Rose was assigned to his table. She approached with her usual warm smile, treating him just like any other customer. Big Shaq looked tired, perhaps from his ongoing tour, and ordered a simple breakfast of eggs, toast, and coffee. While serving his meal, Rose noticed he barely touched his food and seemed distracted, almost sad. Years of reading people's emotions from behind her serving tray had taught her when someone needed a kind word. Breaking from her usual professional distance, she gently asked if everything was all right with his meal. Big Shaq looked up, seemingly surprised by the genuine concern in her voice. He admitted he was struggling with the pressure of fame and missing the simple moments of normal life. Rose, without making a big deal about who he was, shared a brief story about her own daughter's school play and how sometimes the smallest moments matter most. That simple conversation shifted something in the atmosphere. Big Shaq's shoulders relaxed, and he began to eat, occasionally sharing bits of conversation with Rose as she checked on him and her other tables. He stayed for nearly 2 hours, nursing his coffee and observing the regular flow of diner life. When another customer recognized Big Shaq and asked for a photo, Rose noticed him tense up. Without missing a beat, she politely intervened, saying the gentleman was finishing his meal and deserved his privacy. The fan respectfully backed off, but Mr. Patterson, the diner's owner, had been watching the interaction from behind the counter with growing disapproval. As Big Shaq prepared to leave, he tried to leave Rose a generous tip, but she quietly declined the extra money, saying his genuine conversation had been thanks enough. She simply asked him to remember that sometimes the best medicine for a heavy heart is a quiet moment in a simple diner. What Rose didn't know was that Mr. Patterson had a strict policy about celebrities. They were supposed to be treated as photo opportunities to promote the diner. By protecting Big Shaq's privacy, Rose had unknowingly violated this unwritten rule. As she cleared the table after Big Shaq's departure, Mr. Patterson called her into his office. The conversation was brief and cold. Despite her years of loyal service and excellent customer reviews, Mr. Patterson saw her actions as detrimental to the diner's potential publicity. He handed her final paycheck and told her she was fired, effective immediately. Rose stood there, stunned, as the reality of her situation sank in. Single mother, rent due in 2 weeks, and now unemployed. She removed her apron slowly, said goodbye to her shocked co-workers, and walked out of the diner she had called home for the past 5 years. As she waited for the bus home, fighting back tears and wondering how she would tell her daughter about this sudden change, she had no idea that her simple act of kindness was about to set in motion a chain of events that would change her life forever. That evening, as Rose sat at her small kitchen table helping her daughter with homework, her phone buzzed with messages from her former co-workers. The news of her firing had spread through the diner like wildfire, and regular customers were already expressing their disbelief and anger on social media. Rose hadn't told anyone about the incident with Big Shaq, maintaining her commitment to treating him like any other person who needed a moment of peace. Her daughter, Lily, could sense something was wrong. At 9 years old, she was perceptive beyond her years, a trait that both delighted and sometimes worried Rose. "Mom, why did you come home early today?" she asked, looking up from her math worksheet. Rose struggled to find the right words, not wanting to burden her daughter with adult problems, but also believing in honest communication. "Sometimes, sweetheart, doing the right thing has unexpected consequences," Rose explained, pulling Lily into a hug. "But we're going to be okay. We always are." She didn't mention the growing stack of bills in her drawer or the fact that her savings would barely cover next month's rent. Meanwhile, across town, Big Shaq sat in his hotel room, scrolling through his phone. His management team was discussing his upcoming appearances, but his mind kept drifting back to the diner and the waitress who had shown him genuine kindness without wanting anything in return. It had been months since someone had treated him like a regular person rather than a celebrity or a business opportunity. He opened his social media accounts, something he usually left to his management team, and was surprised to see several messages from his Philadelphia fans mentioning the Small Blessings Diner. Curious, he clicked on a hashtag that was starting to trend locally, #JusticeForRose. As he read through the posts, his expression darkened. Regular customers of the diner were sharing stories about Rose, how she had helped an elderly man cut his food when his arthritis was acting up, how she kept crayons in her apron for children, how she would sometimes slip extra bacon to the college students who were clearly stretching their budget. And now she had been fired, apparently right after his visit. Big Shaq's manager knocked on his door, ready to discuss tomorrow's schedule, but stopped short seeing the intense look on his client's face. "Cancel tomorrow's morning meetings," Big Shaq said, his voice firm. "There's something I need to take care of." Back at Rose's apartment, Lily had finally fallen asleep, and Rose sat alone in their small living room, updating her resume. The steady tick of the clock on the wall seemed to mock her as she tried to figure out her next steps. Her phone buzzed again, this time it was Mrs. Chen, a regular customer who owned a small grocery store down the street from the diner. "Rose, my dear, I heard what happened." Mrs. Chen's voice was warm with concern. "Please come by the store tomorrow. My nephew works in human resources at the Marriott Hotel. He's always saying they need good people. I've already called him about you." Rose felt tears welling up in her eyes, touched by the community's support. Throughout the evening, she had received similar calls from other regular customers, each offering help in their own way. Mr. Rodriguez from the auto repair shop offered to delay payment for her car's upcoming inspection. The local librarian promised to watch Lily after school if Rose needed time for job interviews. As she prepared for bed, her phone pinged with a news alert. Someone had posted security camera footage from the diner showing her interaction with Big Shaq. The clip showed her quietly but firmly turning away the fan who had approached his table, and Big Shaq's obvious relief at her intervention. The comments section was filling up with people praising her professionalism and criticizing Mr. Patterson's decision. Rose quickly turned off her phone, not wanting to be at the center of a social media storm. She had always believed that kindness should be given freely, not for recognition or reward. The fact that someone had posted the security footage made her uncomfortable. She hadn't helped Big Shaq to gain attention or sympathy. As she lay in bed that night, Rose reflected on her years at the diner. She thought about all the conversations she'd had, all the stories she'd heard, all the small moments of connection that made her job meaningful. Mr. Patterson's words echoed in her mind. "This isn't about your service, Rose. It's about business opportunities. In today's world, one viral moment can change everything." She hadn't told him that she understood this perfectly well. She had simply chosen to prioritize human dignity over viral fame. As sleep finally began to overtake her, Rose reminded herself that sometimes the hardest choices are also the right ones. What she didn't know was that across town, Big Shaq was making phone calls of his own. The security camera footage had reminded him of something important, something he had almost forgotten in the whirlwind of fame and success. And he had already set in motion a plan that would prove Mr. Patterson wrong about what truly makes a business successful. Dawn broke over Philadelphia, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Rose woke up earlier than usual, her body still on diner time despite no longer having a shift to work. She went through her morning routine mechanically, making Lily's lunch and helping her get ready for school, all while trying to maintain a brave face. As she walked Lily to the bus stop, she noticed people looking at her differently. Some nodded in recognition, others smiled encouragingly. The local news vans parked near the diner caught her attention, and she took a different route home to avoid them. The last thing she wanted was to become a viral story. Back in her apartment, Rose sat down with her laptop, intending to start her job search, when her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number with a London area code. Hesitating briefly, she answered. "Hello, is this Rose from Small Blessings Diner?" The voice had a British accent and a professional tone. "I'm calling on behalf of Michael Edwards, known professionally as Big Shaq. He'd like to schedule a meeting with you this afternoon, if possible." Rose's first instinct was to decline. She didn't want charity or publicity, but something in the caller's next words made her pause. "Mr. Edwards was quite insistent that this isn't about publicity. He says it's about remembering what matters." After some consideration, Rose agreed to meet at a small coffee shop suggested by Big Shaq's team. It was a quiet place she knew well, far from the media attention gathering at the diner. Meanwhile, across the city, Big Shaq was sitting in a meeting that had nothing to do with his music career. Around the table were his lawyer, a business consultant, and surprisingly, 3 former employees of Small Blessings Diner who had quit over the years due to Mr. Patterson's management style. "The location is perfect," the business consultant was saying, pointing to some papers spread across the table. "The lease is available, and the space is twice the size of Small Blessings. The kitchen equipment is already installed from the previous restaurant." Big Shaq nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And the numbers work?" he asked, showing a business acumen that would surprise many who only knew him from his music. "Better than expected," his lawyer confirmed. "Your initial investment is solid, and with the business plan we've developed, break-even could come within the first year. The real question is finding the right person to run it." A slight smile crossed Big Shaq's face. "I think I might know someone," he said, checking the time. He had 2 hours before his meeting with Rose. At the coffee shop, Rose arrived early, choosing a quiet corner table. She ordered a simple coffee and tried to calm her nerves. The barista, a college student who used to frequent the diner, refused to take her payment. "You always helped us out during finals week," she insisted. "This one's on me." When Big Shaq arrived, he came alone, no entourage, no security team, just a man in a simple jacket walking into a coffee shop. He ordered his own drink and carried it to the table himself, settling into the chair across from Rose with a genuine smile. "First," he began, "I want to apologize. My presence at the diner cost you your job, and that wasn't right." Rose shook her head. "You have nothing to apologize for. I made my own choice. Every customer deserves to be treated with dignity, famous or not." "That's exactly why I wanted to meet with you," Big Shaq replied, pulling out a folder from his jacket. "You see, that morning in the diner reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. Before the fame, before If Man's Not Hot, I worked in my aunt's restaurant in London. I learned that a good restaurant isn't just about the food, it's about making people feel welcome, about creating a space where everyone can feel at home." He opened the folder and slid some papers across the table. Rose looked down at what appeared to be business plans and property documents. "I've spent the last day talking to people about you," Big Shaq continued. "Your regular customers, your former co-workers, even the mailman who delivers to the diner. Everyone had a story about how you made their day better, how you remembered their birthdays, their children's names, their favorite orders. That's not just good service, Rose. That's something special. Rose felt her cheeks warm at the praise, but before she could respond, Big Shaq continued. I'm opening a new restaurant in Philadelphia. Well, technically, my company is opening it. We've already secured the location, developed the business plan, and arranged for all the necessary permits. What we need is someone to run it, someone who understands that a restaurant is more than just a business opportunity. Someone who knows how to create a community. He paused, watching her face as understanding slowly dawned. I'm offering you the position of managing partner. Full operational control, profit sharing, and a significant ownership stake. No publicity requirements, no celebrity tie-ins, just a chance to create the kind of place you've always worked to make small blessings become. Rose stared at the papers, her hands trembling slightly. The business plan was thorough, the location perfect, and the terms more generous than anything she could have imagined. But something held her back. This is overwhelming, she said finally. It's incredibly generous, but I can't help feeling like this is too much. I don't want special treatment just because of what happened. Big Shaq leaned forward, his expression serious. This isn't charity, Rose. This is business. Good business. I'm investing in someone who understands what truly makes a restaurant successful. The viral video of you defending my privacy? That just showed me what your customers already knew. You understand that true success comes from treating people right. As Rose read through the documents, Big Shaq shared his vision for the restaurant. It would be a place that combined good food with genuine warmth, where both celebrities and regular folks could feel at home. Every detail had been carefully planned, right down to a special program to provide affordable meals to struggling college students. What Rose didn't know was that this meeting was just the beginning of an even bigger surprise that would shake up the entire Philadelphia restaurant scene. As she sat there, considering the opportunity before her, the wheels were already in motion for a change that would affect not just her life, but the lives of everyone who had supported her through this difficult time. That evening, Rose sat at her kitchen table long after Lily had gone to bed, the business proposal spread out before her. The numbers were impressive, but it was the details that touched her heart: the community outreach programs, the employee benefits package, the student meal program. Everything she had ever wished she could implement at Small Blessings was there on paper. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen: "Whatever you decide, we're all behind you." Word had somehow spread about Big Shaq's offer, though the details remained private. The community's support warmed her heart, but it also made her realize the weight of this decision. This wasn't just about her anymore. As she reviewed the documents again, memories flooded back: the elderly couple who celebrated their 50th anniversary at the diner every year, the group of nurses who came in after their night shifts, the students who would pool their money to share a plate of fries while studying. She had always dreamed of creating a place where such memories could flourish. The next morning, Rose dropped Lily off at school and headed to the proposed restaurant location. Standing outside the empty building, she could already envision the possibilities. The large windows would let in natural light, the corner space would be perfect for a community bulletin board, and the side entrance could accommodate a small coffee bar for quick takeout orders. Her phone rang. It was Big Shaq's lawyer with some unexpected news. The story of her firing had caught the attention of several restaurant industry veterans in Philadelphia. 3 of them had reached out, offering to mentor Rose if she accepted the managing partner position. They saw in her story something they valued: integrity and genuine hospitality. While Rose was contemplating this development, across town at Small Blessings Diner, Mr. Patterson was facing his own crisis. Since Rose's departure, regular customers had been scarce. The viral video had sparked a community boycott, and even the morning rush had dwindled to a trickle. His attempts to attract social media attention had backfired, with local food bloggers criticizing his treatment of employees. What happened next would become a story told and retold in Philadelphia's restaurant community. Rose called Big Shaq's team and arranged a meeting, but not before making a stop at her old apartment building. There, she talked to Tony, the maintenance man who had often fixed her appliances at odd hours, never charging extra. She spoke with the retired teacher upstairs who tutored Lily in math. She visited Mrs. Chen's grocery store and the local community center. When she arrived at the meeting, Rose carried a notebook filled with ideas, not just for a restaurant, but for a community hub. She had a vision that went beyond good food and service. She wanted to create a place that would strengthen the bonds that had supported her through tough times. "I'll accept the position," she told Big Shaq and his team, "but I have some suggestions for the business plan." Over the next 2 hours, Rose outlined her proposals. She wanted to partner with Mrs. Chen's grocery store for fresh produce, hire Tony part-time for maintenance, and set up a homework help corner where retired teachers could earn extra income tutoring students. She suggested a weekly community dinner where local families could cook and share their traditional recipes. Big Shaq listened intently, occasionally making notes. When Rose finished, he smiled. "This is exactly why we chose you," he said. "You see beyond the bottom line. You see the people." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. As renovation work began on the restaurant, Rose threw herself into preparation. She attended crash courses in business management, worked with the mentors who had offered their help, and spent hours planning menus that would combine comfort food with international influences from the community. Word spread quickly through Philadelphia's food scene. Local suppliers, impressed by Rose's commitment to community involvement, offered favorable terms. Former regular customers from Small Blessings volunteered to help with painting and decorating. Lily proudly told her classmates that her mom was going to run her own restaurant. But the biggest surprise came when Rose received a call from an unexpected source. The owner of the building that housed Small Blessings Diner had heard about the situation. Mr. Patterson's lease was up for renewal, and the owner had made a decision that would change everything. What no one knew yet was that this call would lead to an opportunity that would not only transform Rose's new venture but would also right a wrong in a way that no one could have anticipated. As Rose sat in her soon-to-be-opened restaurant, surrounded by paint swatches and menu drafts, she had no idea that the greatest part of her journey was still to come. The construction crew worked late into the evening, installing the new sign that would soon light up the street. Inside, Rose walked through the space, running her hand along the newly installed counter. In just a few weeks, these empty rooms would be filled with life, laughter, and the smell of good food. A text message lit up her phone. It was from Big Shaq. "Check your email. Just got some news that might interest you." Rose opened her inbox, and what she found there made her sit down suddenly, her hand covering her mouth in surprise. The email contained information that would not only secure her future but would also bring justice in a way she never expected. As she read the email, tears welling in her eyes, Rose realized that sometimes life's biggest setbacks can lead to the most amazing comebacks. But what she didn't know was that the email was just the beginning of a series of events that would make headlines across Philadelphia and beyond. The email that made Rose sit down in shock contained an unexpected proposition from the building owner of Small Blessings Diner. Mr. Wong, who had owned the property for over 30 years, explained that he had been watching the situation unfold with great interest. He revealed that not only was he not renewing Mr. Patterson's lease, but he wanted to offer Rose the opportunity to expand her new venture into the Small Blessings location as well. "Think of it as a sister location," Mr. Wong wrote. "I've owned this building since before you were born, and I've never seen someone connect with the community the way you did." Mr. Patterson forgot that a restaurant is about more than just profit, it's about creating a home away from home. Rose's hands trembled as she read further. Mr. Wong's offer was more than generous. He proposed a reduced rate for the first year, with an option to purchase the building after 5 years of successful operation. He also mentioned that several of the former Small Blessings staff had already approached him, hoping to work with Rose again. The next morning, Rose scheduled an emergency meeting with Big Shaq's team. As she walked into the conference room, she was surprised to find not only Big Shaq and his business advisors but also Mr. Wong himself, along with 3 of her former co-workers from Small Blessings. "I hope you don't mind," Big Shaq said, gesturing for her to sit. "When Mr. Wong reached out, we saw an opportunity to create something special. Something that could help more than just one community." Over the next 2 hours, they outlined a vision that took Rose's breath away. The original new restaurant, now named Blessings Heart, would proceed as planned. But the Small Blessings location would be transformed into Community Kitchen, a unique concept that would combine a traditional diner with a culinary training program for underprivileged youth. "We've already secured partnerships with 3 local culinary schools," one of Big Shaq's advisors explained. "Students who complete the training program will be guaranteed interviews at top restaurants across the city. And who better to mentor them than someone who understands both exceptional service and community values?" Rose looked around the table at her former co-workers, Jenny, the line cook who had taught herself 5 different cuisines, Tom, the dishwasher putting himself through business school, and Diana, the hostess who spoke 4 languages. They had all quit after her firing, and now they were ready to come back, not just as employees, but as partners in building something new. "But what about the current Small Blessings employees?" Rose asked, thinking of those who had stayed behind, not because they supported Mr. Patterson, but because they couldn't afford to lose their jobs. Big Shaq smiled. "We hoped you'd ask that. We're offering positions to all current staff who want to join the new venture. No one gets left behind." As the meeting continued, Rose's phone buzzed with a text from Lily's teacher. Her daughter had proudly announced in class that her mom was building a restaurant family. The teacher wanted Rose to know that Lily's words had inspired a class project about community heroes. Tears welled up in Rose's eyes as she read the message. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from single mother struggling to make ends meet, to wrongfully fired waitress, to now potentially running 2 restaurants with a mission bigger than herself. The planning continued into the evening. They discussed menu concepts that would incorporate family recipes from different cultures, a rotating schedule of community cooking classes, and even a weekly pay-what-you-can dinner service. The ideas flowed freely, each person at the table contributing their unique perspective. What touched Rose most was how Big Shaq stayed involved in every detail, not as a celebrity owner, but as someone who genuinely cared about creating something meaningful. He shared stories about his aunt's restaurant in London, about the community it served, and about how those early experiences shaped his values despite his fame. As the meeting wrapped up, Mr. Wong pulled Rose aside. "You know," he said softly, "I've been in business for over 40 years. I've seen restaurants come and go. But what you're creating here, this isn't just a restaurant. It's a legacy." Walking home that evening, Rose took a detour past Small Blessings. Through the windows, she could see Mr. Patterson sitting alone at the counter, staring at empty tables. For a moment, she felt a twinge of sadness, not for herself, but for someone who had lost sight of what truly matters in the pursuit of viral fame. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Big Shaq's team. They had just received word that several other celebrities, inspired by Big Shaq's initiative, wanted to support similar community-focused restaurant projects in their own cities. What had started as one act of kindness was spreading, creating ripples of change across the country. Back home, as Rose tucked Lily into bed, her daughter asked, "Mom, are you happy now?" Rose smiled, remembering the day she was fired, how it had felt like the end of everything. Now she understood it had actually been a beginning. "Yes, sweetheart," she replied. Sometimes life has a way of turning bad things into beautiful opportunities. What Rose didn't know was that the next morning would bring yet another surprise, one that would not only cement her success but would also heal old wounds in unexpected ways. As she fell asleep that night, the email that had started this new chapter still open on her phone, the universe was already setting in motion events that would prove that sometimes, karma has a way of making things right. The morning sun cast long shadows across the construction site of Blessing's Heart when Rose arrived early to meet with the contractors. But she wasn't prepared for the crowd gathered outside. Former Small Blessings regulars, local business owners, and even a few unfamiliar faces stood there, holding paintbrushes, cleaning supplies, and toolboxes. Mrs. Chen stepped forward, a determined smile on her face. "We heard you're opening in 3 weeks. We're here to help." Behind her, dozens of community members nodded in agreement. The local hardware store owner had donated supplies. The high school art teacher had brought students to paint murals. Even the local gardening club had come with plants to create a small herb garden in the back. Rose felt her throat tighten with emotion as she watched the volunteer army swing into action. The contractor, initially skeptical of civilian help, quickly realized these people knew what they were doing. Many had their own businesses or skills to contribute, and all had a stake in seeing this new venture succeed. Meanwhile, across town at the Small Blessings location, Mr. Wong was overseeing the initial cleanup for its transformation into community kitchen. As workers cleared out old equipment, they made an unexpected discovery, a dusty old ledger book tucked behind a filing cabinet. It contained the diner's original recipes from the 1960s, handwritten by Mr. Wong's father, who had been the first owner before leasing it to others. When Rose arrived to check on the progress, Mr. Wong presented her with the ledger, his eyes misty. "My father always said a restaurant is like a story book. Every recipe tells a tale, every customer adds a page. I think he would have been proud to see what you're creating here." The ledger proved to be a treasure trove. Among the recipes was a unique blend of spices for what had once been the diner's famous chicken soup, a recipe that had been lost over the years. Rose immediately recognized it as similar to something her grandmother used to make. As she flipped through the pages, a newspaper clipping fell out. It was a feature story from 1975 about how the diner had helped feed local families during a harsh winter when many had lost their jobs. The article quoted Mr. Wong's father, "In hard times, we take care of each other. That's what community means." That afternoon, Big Shaq arrived for a project meeting, but he wasn't alone. With him was a film crew from a major streaming service. They had heard about the story and wanted to create a documentary series about community-based restaurants and the people who run them. They saw in Rose's story a chance to inspire similar initiatives across the country. Initially hesitant about the attention, Rose's perspective changed when the producer explained their vision. They didn't want to focus on the drama of her firing or Big Shaq's celebrity status. Instead, they wanted to showcase the power of community and the role that local restaurants play in bringing people together. "We want to film the whole journey," the producer explained. "From the renovation process to the training programs, from the community volunteers to the first day of service. We want to show how one act of kindness can spark a movement." As they discussed the project, more surprise visitors arrived, representatives from 3 national restaurant chains. They had been following the story and were interested in creating their own community kitchen programs. They wanted to learn from Rose's model and potentially create a network of restaurants dedicated to both good food and social impact. The meeting evolved into an impromptu workshop, with Rose sharing her vision for how restaurants could serve as community anchors. Big Shaq watched with pride as she confidently fielded questions about training programs, community partnerships, and sustainable business practices. Later that evening, as Rose was reviewing construction updates, she received an unexpected call. It was from a former Small Blessings regular who now worked at City Hall. The City Council had taken notice of the project and was considering creating a new category of business license with reduced fees for restaurants that included community service components in their business models. "They're calling it the Rose Rule," the caller explained. "Your story has made them realize that restaurants can be more than just businesses, they can be catalysts for positive change." The news overwhelmed Rose. What had started as a simple act of kindness toward a celebrity customer had somehow grown into something that could change policies and inspire others. She thought about how her daughter Lily had been right. She was building more than just a restaurant, she was building a family, one that kept growing in unexpected ways. That night, as she updated her project journal, Rose received another surprise. The local Culinary Institute wanted to create a scholarship in her name for students interested in community-focused restaurant management. The first recipient would be Tom, her former dishwasher, who had been struggling to afford his business classes. As she processed all these developments, Rose got a text from Jenny, her former line cook. The message contained a photo of the newly installed kitchen equipment at Blessing's Heart, but it was the background that caught her attention. Through the window, she could see Mr. Patterson standing across the street, watching the renovation work. For a moment, Rose felt that familiar twist in her stomach. But then she remembered something her grandmother used to say: success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. She realized that Mr. Patterson's actions, though hurtful, had ultimately led to something beautiful. What Rose didn't know was that Mr. Patterson's presence outside the restaurant wasn't a coincidence. The next day would bring a confrontation that would test her character in ways she never expected, leading to a moment of truth that would define not just her future, but the future of both restaurants. As the sun set on another busy day of preparation, the stage was being set for a resolution that no one could have predicted. The morning of the confrontation dawned crisp and clear. Rose arrived early at Blessing's Heart to meet with the health inspector for a final review before their soft opening scheduled for the following week. As she unlocked the door, she noticed Mr. Patterson standing near the corner, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. Before she could decide whether to acknowledge him, he approached. His usual confident stride was gone, replaced by the uncertain steps of a man carrying a heavy burden. "Rose," he called out, his voice lacking its former authority. "Can we talk?" The health inspector wouldn't arrive for another 30 minutes. Rose hesitated, then nodded, holding the door open. Together they walked into the restaurant that represented everything small blessings could have been. Mr. Patterson's eyes swept across the space, the community bulletin board already filled with local events, the homework corner with its comfortable chairs, the open kitchen design that would allow culinary students to learn in full view of customers. "Coffee?" Rose offered, falling back on old habits. When he nodded, she moved behind the counter, aware of how different this felt from their last interaction. The coffee maker hummed to life, its familiar sound filling the awkward silence. "I saw the news yesterday," Mr. Patterson finally said, staring into his cup. "About the city council's Rose Rule and the Culinary Institute scholarship." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "My wife, she hasn't spoken to me since everything happened. Says I lost sight of what made small blessings special in the first place." Rose remained silent, letting him continue. "She reminded me that when my father opened the diner, it was never about making it big. It was about creating a place where people felt at home." His voice cracked slightly. "Somewhere along the way, I forgot that." As if on cue, Mrs. Chen appeared at the door with a delivery of fresh herbs for the kitchen. Seeing Mr. Patterson, she paused, her expression guarded. Rose quickly moved to accept the delivery, watching as her former boss observed the easy familiarity between her and Mrs. Chen, the way they discussed which herbs would work best for different dishes. After Mrs. Chen left, Mr. Patterson spoke again. "The diner's empty now. All the regulars are gone. Even the morning coffee crowd found somewhere else to go." He pulled out his phone, showing Rose a local news article. Small Blessings was closing for good at the end of the week. "I'm not here to ask for my job back," Rose said quietly, anticipating his next words. "And I can't offer you one here. Too much has happened." "No, that's not why I came," Mr. Patterson replied, surprising her. "I came to apologize." And he hesitated, reaching into his jacket. "I found these while clearing out my office." He placed a stack of customer comment cards on the counter, all from Rose's time at the diner. Years of grateful notes, simple thanks, and stories of how she had made people's days better. "I never showed these to you," he admitted. "I was too focused on social media ratings and viral possibilities. But these are real. These are what matter." His hands trembled slightly as he pushed the cards toward her. "I thought you should have them." Rose picked up the cards, memories flooding back with each one she read. The young mother whose colicky baby Rose had walked around the diner so she could eat in peace. The elderly man who came in every Sunday after his wife passed away, staying for hours because Rose would sit with him during her breaks. The group of teenagers who pooled their money for one meal, and how Rose would always add extra fries, by mistake. As she read, the front door chimed again. Big Shaq walked in, early for their scheduled meeting. Seeing Mr. Patterson, he stopped, his expression unreadable. The tension in the room was palpable. But before anyone could speak, Lily burst in behind Big Shaq, having convinced her aunt to drop her off early before school. "Mom," she called out excitedly, then stopped short at seeing Mr. Patterson. The girl looked between the adults, sensing the heavy atmosphere. In that moment, something shifted. Mr. Patterson looked at Lily, then at Rose, and finally at Big Shaq. "You know," he said slowly, "my father would have loved what you're doing here. He always said a restaurant should be measured by the stories it creates, not the profits it makes." Big Shaq moved to the counter, ordering coffee in a deliberate show of normalcy. As Rose prepared it, he spoke to Mr. Patterson. "I've been thinking about what makes a place special," he said. "It's not the celebrities who visit or the viral moments. It's the daily acts of kindness that no one films." The health inspector arrived, breaking the tension. As Mr. Patterson stood to leave, he turned to Rose one last time. "I was wrong about what makes a business successful," he admitted. "You were right all along. Thank you for reminding me what matters." After he left, Big Shaq and Rose sat in silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. Lily, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. "Mom, remember when you said sometimes people forget what's important because they're scared of not being important enough?" Rose nodded, surprised that her daughter had remembered that conversation from months ago. Lily continued, "Maybe Mr. Patterson was just scared too." The wisdom in her daughter's words struck Rose deeply. As she prepared for the health inspection, she thought about how fear can make people lose sight of what matters: fear of failure, fear of irrelevance, fear of being left behind in a world that seems to value viral moments over genuine connections. What none of them knew was that this morning's unexpected confrontation would lead to an even more unexpected proposition, one that would challenge Rose's capacity for forgiveness and test her belief in second chances. As the health inspector began his review, events were already in motion that would bring the story full circle in a way that would surprise everyone involved. The day of Blessing's Heart's grand opening arrived with an energy that seemed to electrify the entire neighborhood. The line of people waiting outside stretched around the block, a mix of former Small Blessings regulars, local residents, and curious food lovers who had heard about the community-focused restaurant. Rose stood in the kitchen, surrounded by her team, Jenny at the grill, Tom managing the register, and Diana greeting customers with her warm smile. The culinary students were stationed at their posts, eager to begin their first day of hands-on training. Through the window, she could see Mrs. Chen arranging fresh flowers on each table, insisting that the opening day needed that special touch. Big Shaq arrived early, choosing to work alongside the staff rather than make a celebrity appearance. He tied on an apron and started helping in the kitchen, demonstrating the skills he'd learned in his aunt's restaurant years ago. The documentary crew captured it all, amazed by the genuine warmth and lack of pretense in the scene. As the doors opened and the first customers began flowing in, Rose noticed something unusual. Among the crowd were several familiar faces, restaurant owners from across the city, each carrying a small gift. One brought a vintage cash register that had been in his family's restaurant for generations. Another presented a set of hand-painted plates from her mother's first diner. "We want to be part of this," they told her. "What you're creating here, it's reminding us why we got into this business in the first place." The morning rush was in full swing when an unexpected visitor arrived. Mr. Patterson walked in, but he wasn't alone. With him was an elderly man who Rose recognized from the old newspaper clipping, Mr. Wong's father, the original owner of Small Blessings. At 92, he rarely left his home, but today he had insisted on coming. The old man made his way to Rose, his eyes bright with emotion. "I saw what you're doing here," he said, his voice gentle but clear. "You're bringing back the spirit of what restaurants used to be, not just places to eat, but places to belong." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a weathered envelope. Inside was the original Small Blessings logo from 1960, hand-drawn by his wife. "Every blessing deserves a sister," he said with a smile, offering it to Rose. Maybe this could help connect the two restaurants in spirit as well as purpose. The gesture brought tears to Rose's eyes. She looked at Mr. Patterson, who nodded encouragingly. The healing that had begun during their confrontation continued in this moment of understanding between past and present. As the day progressed, the restaurant hummed with activity. The homework corner filled with students, their tutoring sessions punctuated by the sounds of cooking and conversation. The community bulletin board quickly covered with flyers for local events and offers of help. The Pay What You Can lunch service saw people from all walks of life sitting together, sharing meals and stories. In the kitchen, the culinary students were thriving under Jenny's guidance. One of them, a quiet girl from the local high school, had recreated the special spice blend from the old ledger perfectly on her first try. The smell of the legendary chicken soup filled the air, bringing smiles of recognition to the faces of longtime Small Blessings customers. The afternoon brought another surprise. The city council members arrived, not for a photo opportunity, but to present Rose with the first official, community kitchen, business license under the new Rose rule. The reduced fees and special considerations would help other restaurants follow in her footsteps, creating a network of community-focused establishments across the city. As evening approached, Big Shaq gathered everyone's attention. "There's one more announcement," he said, gesturing for Rose to join him. "What started here in Philadelphia has caught fire. Restaurant owners across the country have been reaching out, wanting to learn from this model. So we're creating the Community Kitchen Foundation, with Rose as its first director. The foundation," he explained, "would provide support and resources to restaurants wanting to implement community programs, culinary training, and inclusive pricing models. It would help preserve the legacy of family-owned establishments while encouraging new ventures that prioritized community impact alongside profit." "But that's not all," Big Shaq continued, turning to Mr. Patterson. "Sometimes wisdom comes from unexpected places, even from our mistakes. Mr. Patterson has offered to join the foundation as an advisor, sharing his 30 years of restaurant experience and his recent lessons about what truly makes a restaurant successful." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Rose. She looked at Mr. Patterson, remembering Lily's words about fear and forgiveness. Then she walked over and extended her hand. "Welcome to the family," she said simply. The evening ended with an impromptu community dinner. Tables were pushed together as neighbors, staff, and strangers became friends over shared meals. The documentary crew captured it all, recognizing that they were witnessing something special, not just a restaurant opening, but the birth of a movement. As the last customers left, Rose stood in the doorway with Lily, looking at the warm glow of their new beginning. The little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom," she said, "remember when you got fired and thought everything was ruined?" Rose nodded, pulling her daughter close. "But it wasn't the end, was it?" Lily continued. "It was just the beginning of something better. Looking around at what they had created, the bustling kitchen where students learned alongside experienced cooks, the community board full of connections waiting to be made, the tables where strangers had become friends, Rose realized her daughter was right. Sometimes what seems like an ending is just life's way of making room for something more beautiful to begin. Big Shaq, who had overheard the conversation, added his own thoughts. "You know what's amazing?" he said, still wearing his apron. "This all started because you treated me like a regular person having a bad day. You didn't see a celebrity to exploit, you saw someone who needed a moment of kindness. And look what that moment created." As they closed up for the night, Rose added one final touch, hanging the original Small Blessings logo beside the new Blessings heart sign. The two images, separated by decades but united in purpose, seemed to smile down at the street where a new chapter in the community's story was just beginning. The documentary crew packed up their equipment, knowing they had captured something rare, a story where everyone won, where kindness multiplied, and where a simple act of treating someone with dignity had sparked a revolution of compassion in the restaurant industry. As the lights went out in Blessing's heart, they illuminated a truth that Rose had known all along, that the greatest success comes not from viral moments or celebrity encounters, but from creating a place where everyone belongs.